The craziest revenge stories from r/Nuclear Revenge. Case: steal the money I need to live? You can spend it on damages. This will be brief and not include identifying info. Mods can verify if they need to. I have most interactions on video. I moved out almost a year ago, and before I did, my mother stole $750 from me. That money took me over 6 months to save. That was almost everything I saved to leave and to support myself, because I was cutting all contact and planned to be on my own. My parents are extremely abusive in every sense of the word: verbal, physically, emotionally, as well as sexually. She knew this and wanted to maliciously sabotage me in any way she could. I say maliciously because she did not want the best for me. She wanted me to continue to be dependent on her so she could abuse me. Both her and Mr. Father took pleasure in abusing me in every way. Fast forward to a day before I moved out. I cut the wires to my TV and all lights in the room. I also poured rotten juice into the carpet, 2 by 3 foot areas, and into the dressers, and let that sit. I cut the cable box as well. I also left some fish in the vent in my room. When I moved out, I said nothing, left no forwarding address, and cut all contact. My thoughts were, you can use the $750 you stole from me to fix it. My parents are by no means poor. My mother inherited over $1 million from her mother, and my father inherited over $500K from his mother. They are extremely well off. I also paid rent to them $700 a month. They didn't need the money they stole from me. It was a spiteful, malicious act. The best Christmas gift I could have asked for. When I was 6, I was molested by my grandfather, and repeatedly was up until the age of 11. I would typically be sent to his house on weekends, occasionally with my mother staying for visits during the week. Due to my grandma being dead due to cancer, she was never around to witness it, and he would always pressure me to do things with him and never say anything to anyone about it. I felt filthy and pissed each time it happened. And because I was so young, I couldn't do much to physically stop it. Until Christmas Eve. For Christmas, my mother was visiting my grandfather to celebrate, and due to her being an alcoholic, she was asleep in one of the guest bedrooms. So my grandfather was in the kitchen, cleaning up, and I was watching TV. I then heard a thud in the kitchen and rushed to check on what it was. It was Grandpa, with a face dropped on one side and a numb leg. I quickly asked Grandpa, "What's wrong?" He could only answer in a thick slur, and that's when I knew he was having a stroke. We learned about it in school. We had also learned how to call 911 to save the person, but that wouldn't be necessary. And realizing this, I simply stood up, smiled at him, keeping eye contact, and walked back to the living room to continue watching TV, and then I waited, watching movies, until it hit the mark where it was most likely too late for anything to save him. I then got my mom and told her what was happening in the kitchen. Mom called 911 and stayed with Grandpa until the ambulance came. Mom hopped in the ambulance to follow Grandpa too, while I was sent to the next door neighbor's house. And he died in the hospital, and up until the funeral I had to play the facade that I was the innocent granddaughter. And to this day, nobody in my family knows what I did. One too many times. When I was younger, especially throughout middle school, I dealt with bullying and toxicity constantly. I've never been much of a Reddit user, but I decided to post my story after watching some of these on YouTube. This situation happened when I was in 7th grade. During that time I was progressively bullied by a group of kids I will call the Goonies. I'm not a small person, and I never have been. Around the time I was around 5'11" plus 150 pound. Although I'm big for my age, I've never been one to fight back. I have impulse control issues and ADHD, so when I get worked up I have a hard time calming down, or I got overboard. Even so, I can mostly hold back my emotions when on medication. The Goonies, the group of kids who constantly made my life hard throughout my school experience. The group comprised of 5 to 6 kids, mostly small and on the football team, but due to their numbers they had an advantage over most people in my school. They preyed consistent on people who were without a group. Most of the time they just took food items during lunch and asked for money from others. On the bad days they would fight others and take whatever they wanted. They had been preying on me and my group of friends for a while, mostly talking shit and taking food. This time was different though. I had worn my grandfather's chain and cross to school I had gotten as inheritance when he passed the week before. When I tell you it meant a lot to me, it did. My grandfather was my pride and joy. We had the best relationship as my father was mostly out of town working. He has never been in the best health, but he got lung cancer a few months before and passed on. The chain was all I really had besides some model train sets and a ukulele. That day I wore my chain to remove some of the grief I was feeling from his passing to make it through the day. My friends knew about the passing and were trying to comfort me throughout the day. But the one class I don't have with them was gym, and in our school we are required to remove jewelry before class. That part was uneventful. The problem was when I went back into the locker room. All of the goons had gym the period after and I would see them as I was in the locker room. As I walked in and took my chain out of my locker, one of them took notice and immediately asked what I had in my hand. I, of course wanting not to cause problems, said nothing important. I went to the bathroom to put it on, and when I walked out all of them were waiting for me. They started to tell me to give them what was around my neck. In the moment I was on the verge of tears because I didn't want to lose one of the only things I had left to remember, my grandfather. So I made a run for it. They blocked a door and started punching and kicking me. I didn't want to cause a fight because I knew it would get out of hand, and I up until then had a perfect school record. When they stopped, I sat up and started to try and leave. The main goonie, the leader of the pack, grabbed the chain and ripped it of me, breaking it and mangling the cross that my grandfather took such pride in. He started laughing as I stared at him in pure disbelief. I saw red. I lost it and started pummeling the main kid, grabbing him by his collar and smashing his head over and over again into the concrete while his friends watched, screaming to stop trying to pry me away. The gym teacher heard all of the commotion. I don't know how he didn't hear me getting jumped before, and came in running, yanking me away from main goon and locking me in his office. He called the nurse and an ambulance. He was freaking out. I got suspended for 3 months only due to cameras in the hall that could see into the window of the door. It witnessed them jumping me. The only reason I didn't get arrested was that camera. Thank God for technology. This might not seem like nuclear revenge yet, but here's the list you are waiting for. Injuries: fractured skull, broken nose, broken jaw, 8 lost teeth, and severe brain damage. He was out for 4 months with some time in the hospital. He didn't make it back onto the football team due to the fear his head would get hit. His grades also took a hit and he had to repeat 2 years. My group, on the other hand, have been free from bullying ever since. So what do you guys think? Did I take it too far, or was it deserved? Let me know in the comments. 2 for the price of 1. So I was laid off. No big deal, right? It happens. But in this instance, it's a little different. I was working at a tech startup and was one of the early employees. I was one of the key people to develop their technology, which significantly helped enable them to raise tens of millions of dollars. I was told early on that they would basically take care of me as the company grew. Well, for a time at least, the company grew leaps and bounds. Again, much in part to the excellent tech I helped develop. Yet, the company had little concern for little old me. Meanwhile, they brought on a bevy of new managers and high-level people, and yet my career was basically stagnant while I was there. But then, things started to slow down due to economic conditions. There had been a couple of layoffs, and I figured it was probably time to leave the sinking ship. So I lined up a new position at another company. I then went into my manager and told him that it seemed like more layoffs were imminent and that I had secured a job offer at another company. I asked him if it would be a good idea if I should take it, and he said that he would let me know. A couple of days later, after he had discussed things with the CEO, they said I was okay and not to take the other position. I turned down the other position because I had invested so much of myself into this company, even having sold my house and moved hundreds of miles to work at this company, and I still had a lot of stock options that I was hoping would be worth something someday. Literally a couple of weeks later, guess what? Yep, they laid me off. Now that other position was no longer available, and because this was at the height of the recession, I was out of work for 4 months until I found another position. I could have even lost my house during this time, and I had to sell some cool stuff to keep paying the bills. The new position I finally found was much further from home and was a financial hardship. I would have been better off if they had just been honest with me and told me to take the offer I had in hand previously. But honesty wasn't ever their policy. Anyhow, before I was involuntarily separated from the company, I was working with a Fortune 500 company that was trying to partner with us on some technology. After leaving, I got wind that they were going to invest $15 million in the company. That bothered me for several reasons. Mostly because most of us were pretty sure that the crooked CEO was pilfering the company for personal gain. I'm thinking that this guy shouldn't be rewarded for his atrocious management of the company, and honestly, I didn't think that it would be a wise investment for this large company. I contacted my inside guy at the Fortune 500 and told him some of my concerns about the stewardship of the money at the startup and that it wasn't really a wise investment. This company was looking for a distribution deal for our technology, so I told them the best use of their money would be to make a deal to exchange a large blanket purchase order for stock. This way, the startup company would still get a big chunk of investment money coming in, but they would have to perform for it. It's the difference between giving a kid an allowance for no reason at all, or giving a kid an allowance based on if they did their chores or not. I didn't necessarily want the investors to walk away from a partnership, because I had many friends still at the company and didn't want to see them out in the cold. So my thought was that this type of a deal would keep the company afloat while minimizing the potential for pilfering and better protecting the investment. All in all, if structured right, it could be a win-slash-win, and make it much more difficult for the crooked CEO and his cronies to loot the company. I additionally told them that I wouldn't recommend investing a penny unless they got a seat on the board of directors. That way, they would have first-hand knowledge of some of the shenanigans going on behind the scenes with their money. That was about it. Now they were armed with some additional information and tactics to perhaps better protect their investment as well as help ensure that if they did invest, everything would be above board. Sometime later, I heard that the CEO pulled the entire company into the conference room and chewed them a new one. He was furious, because the investor had somewhat done what I had suggested. They had dropped their investment from $15 million to $5 million and had come up with some sort of blanket order or something along those lines. I'm not quite sure, but in essence it meant a $10 million loss in the mind of the CEO. He's a bit of a fat slob, so it's quite unfortunate that he didn't just have a heart attack right then and there. No surprising, in the process the investor was denied the board seat, and one can only guess why, dirty secrets and all. In fact, one of the board members that the CEO did bring on board had already done time for defrauding his clients. A marriage made in heaven, I guess. So, not necessarily meant as revenge, but sweet nonetheless, the company basically lost $10 million because of what they did to me. They were all but expecting this money. Had they not laid me off, I probably wouldn't have even thought about putting the investors' interests above that of the corrupt company. In the end, surprising to no one, the investor eventually got majorly screwed by the unscrupulous startup company anyways. The two companies had some disagreements about their distribution agreement and the investor ended up having to pay a major settlement to the startup company after a contentious mediation. But, never fear, don't screw with a Fortune 500. As the startup company was starting to gasp its last breath, they were working on a promising deal with another company they had identified as a major potential customer, one that would put them back on the track to financial success and further line the CEO's dirty pockets. Well, the Fortune 500 company got wind of the deal, bought the other company, and then shut down the deal. That's ninja-level revenge. So in the end, 2 nuclear revenges for the price of 1. I couldn't have been happier to hear about the karmic justice once again hitting the company. Now the company is all but dead. All physical assets went to auction. The CEO is milking the last few dollars out of the account, but because our SEC, Securities Exchange Commission, is all but worthless, he'll start another venture and the cycle will repeat itself. The sad thing is that the CEO, in my humble opinion, makes Elizabeth Holmes, the CEO of Theranos, look like Mother Teresa. I pray that one day they do a Netflix docuseries exposing all that went on at this mess of a company. I can guarantee you, it will be quite a hit. Thank you for listening to another episode of Aw Dear Reddit. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like. Also leave your thoughts in the comments section below. Have a nice day.